All right. So first off, I want to say again, welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. I know that it is not summer, but this is the last session of our Summer of Strong speaker series. And today we are excited to have three expert guests to speak to gun violence in the state of Ohio and really how COVID-19 has impacted it. So it's going to be a great session. I wanted to remind you of who I am. I'm Whitney Austin. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Whitney Strong. And my life changed on September 6th. That's why I'm a part of this world of gun violence prevention. I survived the September 6th, 2018 mass shooting in Cincinnati, Ohio, and really it all boils down to I survived 12 bullets. And I'll never be able to explain why, and I try not to spend too much time on that, but what is crystal clear for me is that I have to do this work. I have to do this work to pay forward the gift of life that has been given to me. So that is what Whitney Strong is all about. Our mission statement is realizing fewer lives impacted by gun violence by advocating and executing on responsible gun ownership. And I hope that when you think of us, you think of the organization that is focused on making sure that people are responsible with their firearms. Also, I think we have a bit of a unique approach in that we are inclusive. So we work just as hard on bringing gun owners into the conversation as non-gun owners, as well as both sides of the political aisle, because we believe if we are to truly make progress, we have to do it with everyone. And we do that by focusing only on majority supported and evidence-based solutions. Just a couple of things to kick us off that I'm really proud of this year in the midst of 2020. We pivoted once the pandemic hit. We believe strongly in the use of gun locks. So we found a way to partner with the National Shooting Sports Foundation to distribute 5,000 gun locks across the state. They are available through the Ohio Buckeye Sheriff's Association and the Cincinnati Police Department. So if you need one or someone you love needs one, go into any of their offices. And then it's been about a year now, but we were really pleased and proud to stand by Governor DeWine's side to introduce Strong Ohio. So those are the things that I'm most excited about today. I also want to give you just a few logistical things for the call. One, you can ask questions at any time. There's a Q&A box down at the bottom. Just type them in. It may not be that I get to them in the midst of, the things that they have to share with you, but I'll get to them at the end for sure. And then the last thing that I want to share with you is just a reminder that we are a volunteer-led organization, and every donation that you make is going toward our mission. And we have an exclusive group of supporters called the Strong Squad. And we're in a campaign right now through the weekend to try and get 5 more members. And if you are a member of the Strong Squad, what that means is you've committed to giving us at least $10 in donations on a monthly basis. And it comes with cool perks. One of them is a super slick Whitney Strong camouflage hat. So just check us out on whitneystrong.org and you can find out more about that program. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our panelists so that they can introduce themselves and really what brought them into the work of gun violence prevention. And I'll start first with Andy Wilson.
Whitney, thank you, and thanks for having me today to talk. My name is Andy Wilson. My job title is that I'm the Senior Advisor for Criminal Justice Policy for Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. And I've been in that position since Governor DeWine took office. Governor DeWine has a background as a prosecutor and the Ohio Attorney General, and he wanted to bring someone on staff to really kind of stay in touch and keep a finger on the pulse of criminal justice issues in the state of Ohio. So that's how I came to work for the governor. Prior to coming to the governor, I was in a prosecutor's office for 16 years. The last 8, I was the elected prosecutor, and that was for Clark County, Ohio, which is Springfield, Ohio, here in Southwest Ohio, between Dayton and Columbus. In my time as prosecutor at that office, I really kind of specialized in prosecuting violent crimes. And unfortunately, Many of those involved felonious assaults and gun-related homicides. We were very proactive as a prosecutor's office. We were very involved with not only the community in some prevention efforts, but when there was a homicide, our prosecutors would go out to the streets with the detectives and work the cases up. So again, unfortunately, throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to stand on the streets over just far too many lives that were ended early because of gun violence. So, I bring that experience with me, and I'll talk as we go throughout this presentation today about what we're doing at the governor's office, what Governor DeWine's initiatives are in this space, and some of the things that we're seeing with respect to gun violence this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, Dion.
Hello, thank you. Good morning. My name is Dion Green. I'm the founder of Fudge Foundation, and it was created from my father from being a survivor and a victim of the Oregon mass shooting that occurred last year, August 4th, 2019, that claimed 9 lives and injured plenty. But my foundation is toward just advocating on gun violence and encouraging survivors to find their voice so we can share it across the world, because our voices do matter. So I'm just, paying it forward. And since I'm, like Whitney said, I was granted life, I'm trying to save and help those get through it. And we'll speak more about it later on throughout the.
Yeah, I feel you. Let's move on to Mayor Nan Whaley to introduce herself.
Hi, Whitney. It's good to be with Dion and Andy. I'm Nan Whaley, the mayor of Dayton. Have been the mayor for 7 years now, and have been active on issues around gun violence since I became a mayor. Actually joined Mayors Against Illegal Guns as one of my first actions of becoming mayor, but had become more central to the issue after the mass shooting in the Oregon district. One of the things we're trying to do and raise awareness is to get some common sense gun legislation passed, either state or federally. And I do believe it will come. I do believe that we are very close to getting action around it. As you say, Whitney, 9 out of 10 people agree that, universal background checks are the way forward. And during COVID particularly, and I know we'll talk about this more, we're seeing an enormous number of gun crimes in the city of Dayton. And these aren't the kind of gun crimes that get national attention like the Oregon district shooting, but they're the everyday activities that are happening in our neighborhoods in Dayton across our community. And those are the ones that don't get any notice, but do affect people's lives just as much. And so, I think it's our job to talk about both the ones that horrify folks because it is so out front, but also the ones that remain silent. Every day, 100 people in this country die at the hands of a gun. 65 of them are from suicides. That's why the work that you're doing on gun locks are so important. But more needs to be done because guns, quite frankly, are just ubiquitous in our community and in our country right now. And so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Whaley. So I think a good place to start is with some data to give everybody a foundation of just what gun violence does look like in the state of Ohio. And then we can begin to talk about, and what does it look like now because of COVID? So I'm going to pass that question over to Andy, but I will just give a backstory about working with him. I was generously given the opportunity to talk to Governor DeWine in early 19 after my shooting, trying to bring forward some bipartisan legislation that I thought could make Ohio safer. And Andy was in on that very first meeting, and I think has been in on every meeting since. And I'm very grateful for his partnership and his willingness to help solve this problem. So with that intro, I'll pass it over to you, Andy, to give a bit of a foundation.
Thank you, Whitney, and you've been a great partner helping us work through these important issues. You asked me to start off this presentation with some statistics, really comparing some of the trends we're seeing this year with what we may have seen in the past. And you and I talked before the presentation. One of the frustrating things when it comes to data is often when you're trying to correlate or collect it for a whole state, there's some delays in the ability to get it. So the data that I'm going to talk about today, I have received from the Office of Criminal Justice Services within the Department of Public Safety. And they have a system there it's called a LIBORS, but it stands for the Ohio Incident-Based Reporting System. And this is a system that law enforcement agencies throughout the state use to report all kinds of criminal justice data. Unfortunately, when I'm looking at 2020, the most up-to-date computation or compilation that I could get for you was for the first 6 months of 2020. So when we're talking about comparisons and we're talking about whether or not gun crime is up, it's up, but how it's up compared to other years, we're going to be talking about the first 6 months of 2020 versus the first 6 months of 2019. So we can compare to the best of our ability, kind of apples to apples when we look at this. So that's kind of the background. I'm going to talk primarily about our large city data, and that's from the 8 largest cities in Ohio. And those are Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron, Dayton, Parma, and Canton. So those will be the cities that are covered by our large city. That's based on population and the agencies from those jurisdictions that report. So I will discuss a little bit some of our mid-sized reporting jurisdictions, and for the purpose of this presentation, our mid-size are cities with a population of 40,000 up to the big 8 there, and then a small size city is a city for the purposes of this report that has a population that's less than 40,000. So that's kind of the parameters for the data that I'm going to give. Let's talk about murder rate when we're talking about the first 6 months of 2020 versus the first 6 months of 2019. All of our major metropolitan areas have seen an increase in the number of murders during that time period. It's not just an increase, it's been an astronomical increase. Now, Columbus, for the first 6 months, they were only up 7% during the first 6 months of 2020. But as you see, or anybody paid attention, that the number has just continued to rise all year. And as of October 20th, they're only 11 homicides away from having a record year for number of homicides. And again, we're only in October and November. We got a couple months left in the year. So you're going to see Columbus shatter the number of homicides, record number of homicides that they've had in any one year since they've been given the statistics. And again, you're seeing the same thing from city to city. Cleveland is up, or was in the first 6 months, up 31% as far as homicides. And Cincinnati, again, has already surpassed last year's total number of homicides, and they are getting very close to passing their record number of homicides for a given year that they recorded it. So overall, again, across the state of Ohio, murder with a firearm is up 27%. And that's the first 6 months of the year statistics. So you're just seeing an explosion of gun violence in our cities. And there are lots of factors, and we can discuss what we think some of those contributing factors are later on. But you just can't dispute the fact that we're seeing homicides at a rate that we just haven't ever seen in this state. Now, it's not just homicides, it's other violent crimes as well. And when I'm talking about other violent crimes, this category is a category, it doesn't necessarily mean that shots were fired, but it means that a gun was used to facilitate an otherwise violent crime. So it could be a robbery where they didn't fire the gun, but they used the gun. It could be rape with guns. It could be assault with guns. And in this category, we have a crime in Ohio called aggravated menacing, and that's basically threatening somebody with a gun or using a brandishing gun and making a threat towards another person. So that is included in this category as well. Again, same thing. It's up across the board. In our large cities, it's up 16%. In our mid-sized cities, it's also up 16%. And even in our small cities, you're seeing an increase in violent crimes, other violent crimes involving a firearm by an increase of about 12%. There's another category that I'll talk about this morning, and that's a category of statistics called all firearm incidents. So these are nonviolent offenses that involve firearms. So this is typically you're illegally possessing firearms, you're illegally carrying firearms, you're illegally transporting firearms. In our large city, that also includes theft of firearms in that category. In our large cities, we're up about 17%. Our medium-sized cities, and again, this is the first 6 months, our medium-sized cities were up 16%, and our small cities were up about 12%. Now, what's interesting about this category to me is I think that those numbers are actually probably underreported, because the way that these cases are made, so the illegal possession or illegal carrying or illegal transport or the theft of firearms when a firearm is recovered, a lot of times those cases are made during traffic stops where an officer finds a gun in a car, or through proactive enforcement of laws. Well, what we know through coronavirus is a lot of agencies, because of fear of having their officers contract coronavirus, because of the inability to get people into courts, because courts were kind of shut down and jails were shut down, that a lot of agencies pulled way back on their proactive enforcement of traffic, their proactive enforcement of street patrols, and they went to a more of a reactive posture with respect to responding to crimes. So I'm convinced that those numbers are actually probably underreported, and you have, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the number of guns being sold. You have a lot more guns out on the street, and a lot of them that are probably being illegally possessed and carried than the arrest statistics show. I do want to take a little bit of time and talk about demographics of gun crime. And again, this is from 2019. This is going to be 2019. So in 2019, OIBRS had 13,577 victims of firearm-related crimes in Ohio. Out of that 13,577, 60% of those victims were African American. With respect to homicides this year in Columbus, 75% of Columbus's homicides for this whole year, the victims have been African American. And in Cleveland, for the first 6 months of 2020, there were 60 homicides, and 55 of those victims were African American. So you can see disproportionately when it comes to being a victim of gun crime in the state of Ohio, African Americans are disproportionately represented, especially when you look at the percentage of the population that African American make in Ohio. So you're looking at about 60% of the gun violence victims, and I may be able to hop on back. I think it's 12.4%. It's between 12 and 14% of the population of Ohio is African American. Now, also, when you look at these homicides, the overwhelming majority of these homicides, the victims fall in the 15 to 24-year-old category. So again, when you look at those stats, you have young African American men disproportionately represented in the people who are being killed in our gun violence. Now, in 2019, 73% of Ohio's murders were committed with a firearm, and that's fairly consistent with national statistics. Also, in 2019, in Ohio, the murders that were committed with a firearm, 93% of those murders were committed with a handgun, and 7% were committed with a long gun. That's a rifle or a shotgun. The majority of guns that were recovered that were able to be traced in those crimes, those were traced to purchases, original purchases. I'm not saying that they showed up after being purchased straight from the FFL, but the cases where they were able to purchase those, the overwhelming majority of those guns were purchased in Ohio originally. The state that was second most represented in purchases was Kentucky. So a lot of guns that are ending up being used in Ohio crimes, when they do the trace back, those guns were originally purchased in Kentucky. And then the other border states, West Virginia and Indiana, kind of fall in after that. But Kentucky was significantly higher than both West Virginia and Indiana. So I want to talk a little bit about the guns that are actually being put out on the street, what we know is happening in 2020. And this is, the numbers for 2020 are just astronomical. Since 1998, when the feds began keeping records on background checks that are done in firearms purchases through FFLs or federally licensed dealers. 2020 is the highest year ever recorded for background checks. So we know that there are more guns being purchased. And again, most of these are legal purchases where a background check's being done, notwithstanding straw purchases. But most of these are legal purchases. We know that guns are being bought this year at a level that they just have never been purchased before, and making their way out into the community at just record numbers. So far, there have been 28,826,449 checks, and that was just through September of this year. June set the record for highest single month of background checks that had ever been done by the NICS system. That record lasted until July, and then it was broken by the number of background checks that were done in July. In Ohio in 2019, Ohio ranked 11th in the country for the number of background checks that were done for federally licensed purchases or transfers. And we had 638,495 checks done in Ohio in 2019. Now, remember, with Ohio, that is only FFL purchases. That is only me going to a gun shop or me ordering a gun that's shipped to a shop from an FFL dealer. That does not include the hand-to-hand transactions where a gun is being sold by me to somebody on Facebook. There's no requirement of a background check being done in that one. So, the number of guns that are going out the street are going out in the community. Again, it's just astronomical, and there's lots of factors that play into that. Now, like I said, most of these are being done legally. The reason I pointed that out, or the reason I even brought up the number of guns that are being sold, is because the more number of guns that are going out on the street or being purchased, the greater opportunity you have for straw purchases, the greater opportunity you have for some of those guns to be stolen, and the greater opportunity you have for those guns to be sold multiple times in hand-to-hand transactions and eventually make their way into the hands of somebody who doesn't have the legal right to possess guns. So that's that's kind of some of the statistical background. I know I've gone for probably far past my time. I'll stop right there and turn it over to you, and we'll pick back up later on in the presentation.
Thank you, Andy. I am admittedly a data geek, so I hope everybody recognizes how valuable that was to have access to that data. It's also equally very sad. And I'm sorry I'm not about to head us in a direction to lift you up, but we'll get there eventually. I want to pass it over to Mayor Whaley. This is our reality. You're living it every day in Dayton. What does it feel like there? And what do you think is behind it? Really, COVID-19, what components of COVID-19 has led us to this place?
Well, I mean, I think overall, the mayors meet regularly in Ohio with the governor twice a week now. And so this issue around just the number of homicides we've seen in the large cities is something that really concerns us, and recognizing that the 3 Cs are likely to have record years. Dayton's isn't as dramatic as the 3 Cs, but it's still significant. And I think I'll make a couple of comments from what Andy talked about that we're seeing is particularly this 15 to 24-year-old issue. And I want to drill into that, because I think it's not necessarily COVID related, because actually in Dayton's data, for 3 months, we actually, in the middle of COVID, we went down while some of the other cities were going up, and then we kind of went back up. So I don't think it's like, oh, it's COVID and that's it. What you've seen over the past 3 years in cities, not just in Ohio, but across the country, is you've seen an uptick in homicide. And this year, you've seen an incredible increase. I think we are really dealing with the fact, and these are hard issues. I think we have really antiquated gun laws, both in the state of Ohio and nationally. I'll give you one example that I just dealt with this week that isn't about this issue, but for example, we're trying to protect polling locations and not have guns go into polling locations. But just to let you know, for example, in churches, handguns are not allowed, but long rifles are. So just, there's just really not a lot of connectedness around gun laws in the state and gun laws federally. So there's all these different kind of weird ways that the gun laws work that I think is problematic. But secondly, we are talking about issues in our communities and issues both with suicide and with 15 to 24-year-olds, where we've seen just an incredible number of people committing suicide that are young in our country. And it is because of our lack of really dealing with issues without it just going right to violence. And that has a lot to do with like how we emotionally respond to things, how we don't have safety nets for that emotional response. And I know this sounds a little woo-woo in it, but it is really, really important that we have taken away all of those safety nets, especially for young people. We have put them in front of screens that we know the data shows actually increases, not necessarily like watching a movie or a video, but it's actually the like social media and the aspect that affects both 10 to 15-year-olds is much more heavy on the belief of their self-worth. And then if they're not valued, what do you think happens? Especially when there is a gun everywhere. Because of just the record number of guns, Andy only gave the legal numbers. The illegal numbers are way, way higher, particularly in communities that are poor. And so therefore, that answer becomes just the place to go, especially when I don't have support as a young person. And I think that's we have to really deal with the fact that it is a lack of social services, a lack of connectivity with our kids, and a lack of understanding that we can deal with issues without killing someone or hurting them by creating violence. And that's what's going on across cities across the country. And that's really what I'm really concerned about. We have to get the gun laws in order, but we also have to recognize that this is a mental health crisis that we have on our hands. And it is a belief in just a lack of acceptance of believing my life is worth anything. And if my life isn't valuable, surely the other person's life is not valuable either. And that is a scary proposition in the disconnected time of COVID and in our country right now.
I couldn't agree more. That's why we are not solely focused on legislation that will only take us so far. I absolutely agree. We came across a chilling stat and some work that we've done down in Kentucky with pediatricians to prevent suicide. But the number one cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds in the state of Kentucky for all of 18 and the first half of 19, from which we have data, is suicide. And I just, as a mother, it's very difficult to think about. So whether it's suicide or interpersonal violence, I agree entirely. And I think that's a perfect transition to Dion. And I said we would turn hopeful at some point. We're gonna take that turn.
Whitney, Dion always gives me hope. So you're right to Andy and I can get very doom and gloom, but Dion always gives me hope.
Yes. So I'm gonna take us to the hopeful person, but Dion and I are bonded because of the traumatic experience of a mass shooting. But unlike me, Dion lost someone who was extremely close to him. And I'll tell you, just as I build more friendships with people in this community, there is no one better at doing good than someone who is compelled to take action because of a loss. And he motivates me all the time. I want to give you a chance to share your story and also the work that you're doing in the community to talk about a lot of the things that Mayor Whaley just mentioned.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Mayor Nan. It's a struggle every day on the mental side, but my thing when people are going through these challenges, the first thing you have to have is faith and a strong support system. And that's why I always thank those that been around the community, like Mayor Nan. This community is blanking over me and keeping my head above water, because I went to dark places at times, just thinking that I'm just alone and stuff like that. But when I discovered myself in that situation and I lost my father, instead of running away from it, I stepped into it. I said, man, I'm going to help those that are going through that. So that's just been my mission, just sharing my story, and that's the deal me and God made. I said, I know I relive it every time I speak about it, but I said, if I can go through the pain and see a smile on somebody else's face, I accept that and start helping them build who they are, because it takes time to share your story. And some people might not be able to share it here and there, but just showing them that somebody can make something positive out of something so negative will give them some sense of hope. Well, maybe down the line, they'll start speaking on it. Then boom, there's another survivor that can help Whitney change laws, because that's what I am. I'm bringing the survivors together so our voices can be powerful. So when Whitney say, "Hey, Dion, we need you there," and bring the soldiers, we're there. But just giving back, and like a family that I dealt with, that her boyfriend killed her, then killed himself, and then the kids were in the house in Cincinnati. I got with the prosecutor's office. We worked with them, because I told the family, I said, sit back and grieve, because I've been through it. Like when all that happened with me, it was just so fast. Like I didn't get to process nothing. I was just crying, do this, do that, this and that. And what I've learned, when you go through something so dramatic, you shouldn't be making decisions so fast, because you don't know what you're making. And we had a problem with that with a funeral home. But me and Miss Arnold, that Andy knows, we got that together, and just take the relief off of her and grieve as a parent. You lost your child. So I do that, and just, I teamed up with the TRC, because I get a lot of survivors that some people don't want to go and just go directly to counseling. They might want to talk to me, and I help them build over the stigma of counseling. So, I would talk to them, team up with TRC, been working with Miss Helen Jones, and I've been referring them to them. I got my mental health first aid, where I talk to them the initial stage. How are you? Do you feel suicidal? But then I give them to somebody that's professional. And I'm like, if you need me to go with you, I'll go with you, just to make you feel comfortable, because counseling works a great deal for me. But COVID kind of messed it up, because when I went to see my therapist, when I go in there, I'll just sit down, we'll look at each other, she'll say, "Hi, Dion," then we'll talk, and then I fall asleep. But when COVID came, it had to be on video. So now I got my dog running around, I'm looking at my phone. I'm not in tune with her like I usually was. So it was kind of hard. And, my intake on bourbon went up. It's just, things just went up. So I just had to get out and just start doing stuff and just start helping. And that's just all I want to do. I just want to just keep inspiring people, and just letting them share their stories, and just doing gun marches. And I've been teaming up with Columbus Care Coalition, just because gun violence is up across the world. So it's just trying to be there and show my support, and just keep fighting till something changes. And the mental health part, that makes me mad so much, because people know that they have mental health issues, but it gets swept under the rug till somebody takes 9 lives. Then it gets put back on the forefront. It needs to stay on the forefront. And some of these are mental health issues, and some of these are pure evil. But people gotta quit letting things go unnoticed. If you see somebody that's not doing right, say something, because you might have could have saved my father's life and 8 other victims. So you just never know. Just be attentive and alert to things. You don't gotta go and try to be a superhero and stop them, but pay attention and give that information over to somebody to step in to maybe solve the situation. There's just so much that needs to be worked on, and that's why I appreciate what you do, Whitney, and what the mayor does, and Andy, what y'all do. Like I said, we're in a network that we didn't choose to be in, but it is what it is. So we got to help others that are scared to step into the light, and I'm willing to work with them and hold their hands and guide them while I'm going through it myself, because they give me hope. When I see somebody smile and start to step into their light, it gives me hope, and it keeps me fighting more. So yeah, that's it.
Hey, Dion, will you tell them how they find out more about your organization, since you are doing really important work to help victims?
Oh yes, I created the Fudge Foundation. You can go fudgefoundation.org, and it's just helping survivors through burial, gas, just all the expenses. I write a check to the families and just help them through their times. Just let them sit back, and I guide them through there till it's time for them to sign, but just to help them grieve, because that's the best. That's the worst part, when you cannot really sit in. And I just tell them, like, the hardest part is when you go left and you go right from the funeral home. You know, that first part when everybody's there showing love is it's so overwhelming, you feel, but it tends to trickle down. And that's where people start to hit depression, because people start to think that nobody's there with them no more. So, you know, I try to stay in contact and check on them and just see how they're doing, and just to show them that nobody has forgotten, you know. But I know that it starts up high and then it goes low, and then people will just start going into depression. So you just gotta just be that strong person, and just stay in contact and just offer my services to them.
Well, we'll continue to talk about the Fudge Foundation, but everybody, you can find him on social media, and he gave you his website. And I promise you, in the short while that I've known Dion, I have witnessed many times him dropping everything to help someone. So thank you for what you do, Dion.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about legislation now a little bit. We know it's not the all that ends all, but it is really important, and we feel like there's some hope. There's some hope for some change in 2021. And so one of the things I learned when I started to educate myself on prevention is, you know, at the local level, there's not a ton that could be done. Oftentimes mayors feel as if their hands are tied behind their back, but that doesn't stop them from advocating and lobbying for solutions at the state and the federal level. And I've seen Mayor Whaley do that a ton. So I'd love to pass it over to you to talk about the solutions that you feel strongest about, that could make a difference.
Thanks. So, you know, I think one of the things I've been telling folks is there's an election in 11 days. And right now we're trying to get a federal stimulus through for local communities and states. And we're not seeing much movement, obviously, because of what's coming with the election. But there are, I think, lots of opportunities on the horizon. And this is simply because of the activism of people like Whitney and Dion and the moms from Moms Demand Action, who have really changed the conversation around common sense gun legislation. As Whitney mentioned, you know, we support Senate Bill 221, which the governor put forward with Senator Matt Dolan last year. It has not gotten a lot of movement. I'm not hopeful that it's going to get movement, to be honest, because I think the state legislature has become incredibly extreme and doesn't pay attention to how the majority of Ohioans think something should go. Because of the way the system is, they don't have to worry about what the whole community thinks. And so that is a frustration for us, but we have opportunities as well in the federal government. And what happens in the United States Senate this November will make a big difference, frankly. As some of you that have been following this may notice that, or remember that even before Dayton happened, I think it was House Bill 8. It was definitely one of the single numbers. Was it 8? I think, Whitney, was for universal background checks, was passed out of the House in January or February of 19. So it was one of the first things passed out of the U.S. House. Should the Senate change hands in November, I am sure in January and February of 2021, that bill will move. So there is huge opportunity right now, number one, with elections and paying attention to who is a common sense legislator, both in the state house and in Congress, because you have a lot of say in the next 11 days about that. And then, you know, it will be on all of us as we advocate for just common sense gun legislation in the first of the year. And I know Whitney and Dion are going to be working overtime with me to make sure that that happens. I'm so hopeful for it. And, you know, for the people of Dayton, as many of you may have witnessed on August 4th, when thousands, I think over 1,000 people came to the vigil, they organically called to do something. And so since the shooting, and even before that, but really since the mass shooting, it has been something that has been the top priority for me. So wherever we can talk about common sense gun legislation, whatever venue, wherever we can get movement, I'm going to be there. And I'll tell you what, when we are able to get something passed, I am going to celebrate. And I know Whitney and Dion are going to too. Andy will too, I bet too. So.
Yes, no, I'm personally excited about what 2021 holds, and getting back to DC for that matter, because just really hasn't been doable this year for many, many reasons. So Whitney Strong is really focused on bipartisan legislation, and that takes me to what I want to talk about specifically today that Mayor Whaley mentioned. Granted, I don't know the number on this one. I know that comprehensive background checks is HR 8, but what is Strong Ohio? What's the number?
Senate Bill 221.
There we go, 221. I need to memorize that. Senate Bill 221. Mayor Whaley talked about the Oregon district. I'll never forget watching everybody chant, do something, do something, do something, and then seeing things speed up so quickly based upon what steps we could take to make Ohio safer. And Strong Ohio is a 17-point plan. And I know that as Whitney Strong has lobbied and advocated, I've had many people say, well, but what is it? It's a lot, it's 17 points. So as we head into the new year and we spend effort and time as an organization to get it passed, I think the first step is educate. And so I would like to pass it over to Andy to help people understand just what is it? What are all those points? Not literally every one of them, but talk about some of them.
Thank you, Whitney. And again, there's no way I could go comprehensively through the bill in the time allotted to today. But Strong Ohio was a pretty comprehensive package that was aimed at gun violence and some mental health issues that the governor put forth after the Oregon district shooting. Now, what's interesting, and Whitney hit on this early on, is look, the governor cares deeply about this issue. Gun violence and Ohioans needlessly losing their life as a result of gun violence is something that he is passionate about. Again, he was inaugurated in January of 2019. And Whitney, I think we met with you late February, early March of 2019 over there in Columbus at the governor's office. You were able to tell your story. And from there, we really started working in this space, looking at how we may be able to address some of these issues even before Dayton occurred, even before the Oregon district shooting occurred. We were bringing stakeholders in, we were talking to folks about these issues. So the momentum was starting to go with how we were going to address some of this stuff. I'll talk a little bit kind of about the background that led us up to this. We start with the concept that the Second Amendment is an individual right, just like the First Amendment. It's in the Bill of Rights to protect individual liberties and freedoms, and we're going to respect that. But we also need to balance and look at our need to address some of these situations that are causing needless deaths in Ohio. So we really kind of took a very conservative, balanced approach at how we could do that, how we could actually accomplish something that constitutionally would move the needle and protect Ohio citizens. So we brought a lot of stakeholders in on every side of the issue and sat down and heard stories, heard ideas. And what we were hearing is really kind of three areas where people just didn't argue with these concepts. The first concept was the idea that, look, if somebody is mentally ill, if they are truly mentally ill to the point of being a danger to themselves or others, that we need to have some kind of process that again allows for due process to protect their constitutional rights, but some kind of process to just check and make sure that that person doesn't have easy access to guns if they are truly a danger to themselves or others. And everybody agrees with that. When a person is ill to the point of being a danger to themselves or others, they shouldn't have access to guns. Simple point that, again, everybody kind of agrees with. The second point was, look, if I am selling a gun in the state of Ohio to somebody, I don't want to sell that gun to somebody who doesn't have the legal right to possess that gun, or somebody who's going to go out and do something terrible with that gun. And everybody agrees on that. Nobody, unless you're a criminal, nobody wants to put a gun in the hands of somebody that doesn't have the legal right to do that. So as we talked about that, we talked about, look, well, how can we set up a system so that law-abiding citizens, when they are selling guns or transferring guns, can check to make sure that the person that they're selling the gun to actually has the legal right to possess that gun. And then the third thing that everybody agrees with is what we talked about already. Look, we have a generation of young African-American males who live in our urban areas, in our distressed neighborhoods, who are really being slaughtered. We're losing a generation of some of our best and brightest. And we need to do what we can to address that. So out of those three areas where everybody, no matter what side of the issue you fell on, you kind of agreed with those concepts, we started to kind of hammer out, okay, if we were going to put a package together to address this, how could we focus on these areas where people tend to agree? And again, the more agreement you get, the better chances you get of actually moving something through and getting something passed. So that's how that was the background for how we began to work on Strong Ohio. So I'll talk about each one of those points individually. In Ohio, and Dion said something, he said something great. He said, look, if you see something and you know somebody's sick or dangerous or something like that, you got to say something. You got to say something. You got to bring it to somebody's attention. That's 100% true. We need folks to do that, but we also need the second step where the system is equipped that when somebody tells them, hey, look, this person is ill, they're a danger, then we need a system that can adequately address that and assess that. And what we found is, our system just wasn't doing a good job or doesn't do a good job of doing that. We have our system here in Ohio has something called a pink slip. So if I'm ill, if I'm mentally ill to the point where I'm a danger to myself or others, the police can be called, I can be taken down to the hospital, and they can involuntarily hold me for up to 72 hours where they assess whether or not I truly am a danger to myself or others. And if the mental health folks at the hospital agree that I'm a danger to myself or others, they can file an action in probate court to have me basically involuntarily treated or held. Now, what's interesting is when that happens, when that probate court action happens and I'm held involuntarily, that comes with an adjudication that prevents me from being able to buy or possess a firearm. So there is a process in place, but what we found is the process just doesn't work well. First of all, emergency rooms are overwhelmed. Second of all, the only thing it accounts for is mental illness. So what we were finding, what we're hearing from our cops on the street is, look, this person has a coexisting diagnosis. So they have a mental illness, but that mental illness, they don't become dangerous until they start drinking or till they do drugs or something like that. And as a result of the combination of the substance abuse and the mental health issues, the person becomes dangerous. We take them down to the ER. They're high on meth or whatever it is. We take them down to the ER. They're clearly a danger to themselves at that point. But when they come down off of their high, they're no longer a danger to themselves or others. And the ER is kicking them out after 48 hours. And guess what? The police are back out, 4 days later because the person's, threatening a neighbor or, acting dangerous again. So as we talk to the folks in the trenches, the law enforcement in the trenches who deal with this day in and day out, they were finding that this was just an incredibly common occurrence, that they just weren't able, they could name off a list of people in their community that they believe because of substance abuse or mental health issues were clearly too dangerous to have a gun, but had never had an adjudication that put them under disability. And again, under federal law and state law, if you are basically a chronic alcoholic or a drug dependent person, you don't have a legal right to possess a firearm. So we just don't have a good system in Ohio for addressing that. So the first part of Strong Ohio was legislative language that kind of cleaned that process up and allowed for a more efficient way for folks who were in that situation to get their due process, to get a hearing, and if the law required, to get that adjudication that would prevent them from purchasing a firearm or possessing a firearm. So that's the first part of Strong Ohio. The second part was dealing with the ability to make sure that somebody you're selling a firearm to actually has the legal right to possess a firearm. Ohio has no requirement for background checks other than the requirement that is in federal law if you're a federally licensed dealer. So if Andy Wilson goes to a federally licensed gun shop, whether that's Cabela's, whether that's Fur Fin or Feather, whatever it is, and I want to buy a gun, then I have to go through a federal background check. That's a NICS background check, where they do all of the checks necessary to make sure that I don't have a felony conviction, that I'm not drug dependent, that I don't have a mental health adjudication. And once I clear that, then I can legally purchase that firearm and walk out of the store with a firearm. However, Andy Wilson can get on Facebook right now or Craigslist right now and find a gun and arrange to meet somebody in a Kroger's parking lot, and I can, out of the trunk of their car, I can purchase a gun, and never having seen that person before, that person know nothing about me at all, and I can get that gun. No background check required at that point. So what we wanted to do is say, hey, look, if you're going to sell a gun in a hand-to-hand transaction, and you don't know that person, you're not familiar with that person at all, we want you to do some minimum due diligence just to ensure that that person has the right to possess a firearm. And the plan in Strong Ohio is to provide a easy to use free state background check system that would issue a verification of whether or not somebody has the right to possess a firearm. So the way it would work is, again, if Andy Wilson, in that same scenario, if I'm buying a gun off of Craigslist today, the person I'm buying the gun from could be like, hey, look, since I don't know you, I'm going to need you to prove that you have the right to possess a gun. I could get what we call a seller's protection certificate. I get a hold of public safety. They do a background check on me. They issued me the certificate. When I go to buy the gun, I show the certificate to the person that I'm buying the gun from. They just copy the number down, take a picture of it with their phone. They somehow record that they checked it, and they sell me the gun. And if it turns out that I was under disability, and I do something terrible with the gun, when the law enforcement do a trace on the gun and they trace it back to the guy that I bought it from, all the guy has to do is say, look, I sold the gun. He showed me a seller's protection certificate. Here's the number that he showed me, and verify that they actually checked that. And then that person at that point would be immune from the illegal transaction in firearms. So that's the concept right there. Look, we just want to make an easy system where people could do minimum due diligence to check and make sure that a person buying a gun from them had the right to possess a gun. And then the final point of Strong Ohio is really what we've talked about, again, the first half, and what's going on in the cities, and what Mayor Whaley talked about, the part that doesn't get a lot of attention, but overwhelmingly accounts for our homicide deaths. And that's what's going on, again, in our cities with predominantly young African-American males using these handguns. So what we know about gun violence in the streets is really through studies, the overwhelming number of these homicides that are taking part in the streets are really being perpetuated by a small group of people who are willing to pull a trigger. And they are being carried out with typically handguns. Those handguns are either stolen or illegally obtained. They're being carried and possessed typically by somebody who doesn't have the legal right to possess them, and they're being used time and time again in these homicides. And another thing that we're seeing, again, with the numbers of homicides, or the age being that 15 to 24, a lot of these guns are being carried by juveniles, given to them by older people who know that they're juveniles. So again, all of those are violations of the law. So again, when you talk to chiefs of a big city, they'll tell you over and over that, look, if we could get if we could send this small portion of people who are willing to pull the trigger and use a gun in gun violence in our city, if we could get them out of our community, even for a short time, you would disproportionately affect or drop gun crime, exponentially drop gun crime in our city. And the real story of gun violence typically is that you'll have someone, let's say, I'll use Whitney as an example. Whitney and I are on the streets, and we're at a bar, or we're members of a rival gang, or we just don't like each other. We get in an argument, and we're in a fight. We may be punching each other. Whitney goes to her car, gets a gun, and shoots me in this parking lot. Doesn't kill me, but she shoots me. And it happens in front of a bunch of my friends and a bunch of her friends. And I get taken to the hospital. Typically what's happening in that case is, look, I don't want to have a reputation for snitching on Whitney, or I'm scared, or, I'm just going to take care of it myself. But I don't cooperate with the police. I don't tell, hey, it was Whitney that shot me. None of my buddies tell, hey, it was Whitney that shot me. But what happens is, over the next couple of weeks, I start carrying a gun for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm out looking for Whitney for payback, and my friends are carrying guns too. Number two is, look, Whitney shot me once. She may be coming back to get me. And typically what happens in these situations is you have a flare up or a period of a couple of weeks where my friends and I are out looking for Whitney and her friends, and I'm shooting up her house, I'm shooting up her car, I'm shooting at her friends, I'm shooting into groups that she's with. And these flare-ups happen back and forth. And again, people are getting shot, houses are getting shot into, and ultimately people are getting killed. And if you talk to your law enforcement officers who work the streets, again, they will tell you that the scenario I just gave you, or some version of it, is the overwhelming number of homicides in gun violence, or represents the overwhelming number of gun violence and homicides that we see on the street. So what happens is, and again, what we see a lot of times is, in that 2-week period, Whitney may get pulled over, or Whitney may get caught with that gun that she's carrying, to protect herself from me, or to do payback on me, or whatever. She's under a disability. She's carrying the gun in a way that she doesn't have the legal right to carry it, or something like that. But those are all lower level offenses. So as a result, a lot of times she's not put in jail. She's issued a date to show up to court, and she, again, goes right back out on the street, gets another gun, and we continue to shoot it out. So what we found is, if we're able to intervene or break this cycle while these flare-ups happen, then it literally can cool these rival groups down, and it can significantly reduce the gun violence in the community. So what we need to do is we just need some tougher laws against folks who are convicted criminals, who don't have the right to possess guns. They got to be convicted violent criminals. They don't have the right to possess a gun to begin with because of that conviction, and yet they continue to carry a gun or use a gun in criminal acts. So that's really kind of the third part of the legislative package, Strong Ohio. It's dealing with what we call street level gun violence in these numbers. There's also some non-legislative parts of Strong Ohio. We're pushing very hard to fix our background check system. It's called NICS, so there's a fixed NICS portion of it. The problem is the information in a background check that the feds are doing is only as good as the information that they're getting from the locals. So we need to improve the quality and the timeliness of the information that we are getting from our locals with regard to convictions, mental health adjudications, substance abuse adjudications. We need to do a better job of getting that into the system. So the governor has invested in a computerized system that he's going to roll out for local governments that will link directly with the NICS system to help deal with some of these issues. And Whitney, I'm cutting it short because I know we're getting short on time, but literally it's such a big package that that's about the best I can do from an overview point of view without getting too far into the weeds.
Yeah, no, I'd say that part was very helpful, but you're right. You just skimmed the surface of of all 17 points. So if people wanted to learn more about it, where's the best place they can go?
If you just Google Strong Ohio, I believe it'll lead you to our website. I believe our communication section has the Strong Ohio stuff up on that. So if not, I'll get you some information, the actual the packet that we have on it. But I'm it's been a while since I've checked on the website, but I know that it was up there for a while.
Okay. I agree with you. Google will help. It will get you there. The other question that I have for you, just to finish us up, Mayor Whaley mentioned this as we head into 2021 as one of just the many pieces of legislation that we need to move forward. What do you think the chances are for 2021, followed with what can people do that want to help? What would be the most powerful actions they could take?
You asked me what the chances are, and honestly, I just don't know. I'm kind of a political outsider. I came from the county to the state, so the legislative side isn't my strong suit. I'm on the policy side. I help craft some of these ideas and kind of bring some of the real world experience to look. Here's what's going on in the streets. Here how this actually plays out. So I don't have as good a feel for the legislative side. I will tell you, it all seems so balanced to me, and it all seems reasonable with respect to everybody agrees on these big concepts, and here's a reasonable plan that addresses these big areas of agreement. But yet, like Mayor Whaley said, it just hasn't got much traction at this point. Contact your local state rep and state senator and tell them, hey, look, we need to move something. We need to move it. Look, I can tell you this, for anyone on here who's watched the governor's press conferences, he talks about it all the time. He talks about, he gives examples from gun violence throughout the state because he cares so deeply about the people of this state. And it's literally, as I work with him, it's almost like he feels the pain and the grief and loss for every individual that we lose as a result of gun violence. I see it on his face. I can hear it in his voice. He cares deeply about the well-being of the people of the state, and he's tired of them dying senselessly, and he wants to do everything in his power to address it. So he's very passionate about this issue and protecting our citizens.
Thank you, Andy. I can chime in that what would be helpful is if you go to whitneystrong.org and you sign up as a volunteer. It's under Get Involved, and you specifically call out that legislation interests you. We can turn you into a field advocate, which sounds fancy, but really what it boils down to is you're going to help us find people like you to send emails, make calls, take trips to Columbus to help us move legislation forward. So do that. And I've heard it from everyone. Those calls matter, those emails matter. So don't dismiss them. Take the 5 minutes that it takes to send that email. We all, in the world of gun violence prevention, would appreciate it. So we've gone over a little bit. There were some more things to chat about, but that's okay. We're going to wind us down. Maybe we'll have to do another, we could do Fall of Strong, like we said. So we can find other ways to get the experts in front of you all. There is one question I wanted to put out there really quick, Andy. I don't know if you have eyes on this, but any updates on what's happening with Stand Your Ground within the legislature?
I don't have any updates on that right now. I know it's just kind of sitting over there.
They did have a committee hearing a few weeks ago, which was really concerning to us. So,
okay.
So they did do that. I know that the Stand Your Ground group had reached out to me, and we put out a video about it. So it needs to be paid attention to, particularly during lame duck. It's a really big concern for us in lame duck. So if you can do some advocacy in Ohio against Stand Your Ground, I mean, that's one of the things that's so frustrating about this legislature is they just don't get it when it comes to common sense gun legislation. I want to talk about something that will make our African-American communities more dangerous: Stand Your Ground legislation.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Whaley. Right, well, again, thank you everybody for joining today. I appreciate the expertise of everybody on this panel, and I'm committed to putting people like this in front of you all again and again so that you can educate yourself and take action. The last thing I'll just share to remind everybody is where we started. We're a volunteer-led organization, and we're doing many, many things, not just legislation, gun law, suicide prevention, et cetera. So you can see here what $10 a month does, 25, 50, or 100 a month. We would love for you to join the Strong Squad. So again, visit whitneystrong.org, get involved as a volunteer, make a donation. We appreciate you. And thank you again, Pam.